Hey, thanks so much for accessing this content. I just had a chance to preach locally and thought, you know what? You know who needs to hear this? My Red Letter Living audience. So I hope you enjoy it.
Well, church, I just lost a 13-year battle. 13 years my wife and I have been battling, and last year we got a dog. A puppy, a cockapoo. Church, I'd like to introduce you to the newest member of the Zehnder family. This is Ziggy Zehnder. I figured you'd do that. 13 years. 13 years. It was a slow, methodical battle that really escalated when we moved to Omaha. Turns out everybody in our street owns 2.5 dogs. That didn't help. Then some of our best friends, they got a brand new cockapoo named Ollie, and my wife, unknowingly to me, said that she would dog sit. It'd just be one time. And then that turned into, we'll dog sit for them every time they go out of town. And it turns out this family goes out of town more than they stay in town. And so when we would dog sit for Ollie, not only would my wife's heartstrings be tugged, but then she got my 2 boys joining in on the battle. And so I don't know, in a weak moment last August, I took my wife out to dinner and I said, I give up. I'm done. I see the joy that you all have. I feel like a bad father and husband, and so I'm giving my consent, my blessing, my approval. Let's knock it out of the park for Christmas this season. So that way, it'll be a big surprise. It'll be the boys' main Christmas present. It's going to be this awesome surprise. That would also kind of give us a few months to sort of, get ready for it. We had a couple travel plans that we wouldn't have to adjust. And so I gave my blessing that night in August for December Christmas puppy in the Zehnder home. And 48 hours later, miraculously, my wife gets a text that Ollie, the dog we've been watching, has a half-brother in Missouri that's available. The same father, they half-brothers. And not only that, but it's on sale this week. And this was the picture that was online. I figured you'd do that. So that's why 48 hours later, Ziggy was in our home. We've now had Ziggy. He's 7 months old, and so we've got to sort of figure out what it's like to have a puppy and go through all the things involved with raising a puppy. And so the late night howls, the potty training, which, by the way, we had just invested in brand new furniture. That's not something you should do. We found that out. When they get their legs behind them, and without quite the knowledge, literally running away, not knowing if they'll ever return to you or not. We had all of these moments. And Ziggy, he's doing well. He's got his bathroom stuff pretty well in order. But you know what I've found in these 7 months? Allison is his favorite. Yeah. My boys are second and third, for sure. And I am a distant fourth. As Ziggy was potty training in the home, he would reserve a lot of his poops for my main office, so I had that going for me, which is nice. I'd be running a Zoom, and then all of a sudden, the corner, Ziggy, of course. My wife thinks Ziggy is sinless. She thinks all dogs are sinless. I'm not so sure. How many of you think dogs are sinless? I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you think they're sinless, and then you have to choose one or the other. I'm going to ask the other question. Yeah, I had this last service as well, and Allison was in here, so she was able to see that she's wrong, I'm right. How many of you would say, no, dogs are very sinful? They're full of sin. I agree. They're like toddlers where they look at you, they know what they're about to do is wrong, and then they run off, hide, and go do what they know they shouldn't do. So again, Ziggy's made a lot of advancement. He's not really going potty intentionally in the house, but he has these things we found out called excitement drips. I'd never known what that was. And so when we have parties later tonight, we'll put Ziggy in a doggy diaper still because he can't contain his excitement when people come over. He's sinless. He's so happy, Zach. I get it. But why did we have to get a leaky one? Probably that's why he was on sale. Ever think about that? That's why he was discounted. Within a couple of months, the family now started saying, Ziggy needs a brother or sister. He's so lonely. So I brought you all here today, let's get on our knees. I want you to extend your arms out to me. I need your help. I need your help. My point in bringing this up to you today is that you would pray for me. No, really. But when you sign up to have a dog, you have a different life. Those who have a dog, you understand. Those who don't have a dog, you don't understand. But when you buy a dog or hitch your wagon to inviting a puppy into your family, like you have to change how you live. Remember, you used to be really annoyed with the people that came over to your party and said, oh, we got to leave early to let the dog out. We are that annoying family now. Some of you in winter, you enjoy your being inside and kind of tucked away. But no, when you have a dog that needs to be walked every day, you've got to go out in sub-zero temperatures to walk your puppy. And if you're a good neighbor and a good dog owner, you've got to not only walk your puppy, but when they poop, you've got to be ready to pick it up and then hold it in a dangling bag of poop walking around for a mile. When they do that. And so there you are in sub-zero temperatures walking around for a mile with a bag of dangling poop, and you start asking questions. Is this really what I'm here for? So I got that going for me, but I am a doggy dad. Ziggy is my sinless doggy, so I needed you to know that. But when you get a dog, you change how you live. At least you ought to. Which, by the way, when you hitch your wagon to believing and following Jesus, it changes the way you live, does it not? Which leads us into our question for today. What gives you the right to tell me how to live? We're in a collection of talks on the reason for God, and that's the question. What gives you the right to tell me how to live? In fact, let's say that, but kind of say it like snarky. What gives you the right to tell me how to live? Let's see if we can do that. What gives you the right to tell me how to live? Wow, you guys do snarky really well. Okay, I know how to get you now. That's good. So this series is Reason for God, and we're asking some big questions that skeptics and unbelievers and spiritually curious have. But if we're honest, those of us in the faith have these questions too. You know what I'm grateful for before we get into it today? That we have a God that can handle our hardest questions. He's not afraid of them, he welcomes them. I do hope that over time, as we unpack these, that it would be less questions and more trust and faith in God, but he's okay with your questions. He always is. And so we've asked, so far, is the Bible a myth? How can you trust what's in here? We've asked the question, how can you say there's only one way to God? Future weeks, really big questions. Why is God full of love and wrath at the same time? How can a good God allow suffering? And why is the church responsible for so much injustice? Really deep questions. But today, what gives you the right to tell me how to live? Church, do we have a right to tell people how to live? The answer is yes and no. So let's unpack it a little bit. How many of you have heard that you are not supposed, the Bible teaches that you are not supposed to judge others? How many of you have heard that before? I've heard it 1,000 times. How many of you've all heard that too? Yeah, the Bible teaches you're not supposed to judge others. The number one quoted verse in the Bible is actually not John 3:16. It's Matthew 7:1. Judge not unless you want to be judged. And the reason it's the most quoted is because not only do Christians have it memorized, non-Christians have it memorized too. And they will say it back to you when they feel like you're judging them, except they'll somehow switch into the Shakespearean King James version. Judge not lest ye be judged. It's like, wait, you know King James? And so we hear this and we think, well, the Bible says you're not supposed to judge others. Even when you type into Google Bible verses on fill in the blank, I do this, and I did this week, and one of the top websites is always openbible.info, and it always works so that, kind of like Reddit, where you can vote for the ones that are most helpful, and so the top verses at openbible.info on Bible verses on judging others, it's Matthew 7:1, judge not lest you be judged, and then it's Luke 6:37, which is the same verse just said in the Gospel of Luke. But all the way down, 29th on the list, is the verses I want to get to today from 1 Corinthians 5, chapter 5, verses 12 to 13. People believe it's our right not to judge others in this world because they only hear the Matthew 7:1 and the Luke 6:37. But maybe they haven't heard the 29th most popular verse on judging. I think this idea of judging others has been treated incorrectly and taught horribly. By the way, when I talk about judging others, let me preface, I'm not saying like the judgment at the end that's like heaven or hell. Only God can do that. What I'm more calling is a judgment on sort of holding someone accountable to a standard, to a set of beliefs. And I want to offer this today, that God's word doesn't tell us not to judge. It actually tells us who to judge. See, Paul is writing to the Corinthian church, and the Corinthian church was just a total disaster. They were a mess. I mean, you look at all the problems they had going on. There was divisions, there was cliques. The rich were treating the poor extremely unfairly. Not only this, but the believers, and again, we're not talking a church of 1,000, we're talking about 100 people. They had lawsuits amongst other believers. Can you imagine coming to worship together and you guys are suing one another? Like, that's not great. And so not only that, but like people were getting drunk on communion. There was sexual immorality all over the place. And there's a sin in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 that Paul brings up. He said, it's actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you. By the way, in the red words, I want you to read those. And of a kind that even pagans do not tolerate. A man is sleeping with his father's wife. Awful, egregious. There's incest inside the church. So egregious that even the heathens were looking, man, that Christian's jacked up, he messed up. You hear what's going on in there? And rather than dealing with that sin, what is happening in the Corinthian church, we know from the next set of verses that they're not only tolerating it, but they're like prideful, and they're boasting about how gracious they're being to this man. And so Paul, the writer in the Bible that's like responsible for the grace doctrine that we have, so a man filled with grace, Paul is saying, you guys are crazy. He says, I'm not even there, and I'm judging him from afar. Like, don't be boastful about the grace that you have. No, this man is sinning, and he has no right to do that. So I'm passing judgment from afar. Why? Because this guy, he is in the Jesus community. He is a follower of Jesus. He has signed up to be a disciple, and his behavior is way out of whack with Jesus followers. So out of whack that those outside of our church even think this guy's a fool. He signed up to follow Jesus, and not only is his behavior unbecoming of what he signed up for, but also he is boasting and bragging about it as well. Don't put up with that. And that leads us to the verses that I want to get to, the end of the section where Paul says this, what business is it of mine to judge those outside the church? Are you not to judge those inside? God will judge those outside. Expel the wicked person from among you. And so this very clearly looks like we have a call and right to judge some, but not all. Paul isn't saying don't judge. He's telling us we have a right to judge those that are inside, but not those that are outside. You know, I think Christians are notorious for policing the behavior of people outside of the faith while we do a very poor job of policing the behavior of those inside. I think up to this point, collectively, like we've kind of flip-flopped this verse, and we've done the opposite of what Paul has asked us to do. The way that Andy Stanley summarizes it is this phrase right here. Let's say it together. Judge the believing, not the heathen. I think that's pretty good wisdom. And so in light of this passage today, I want to offer 3 challenges to you as the church and those of us who call ourselves Christian. 3 challenges that I think can help restore the public witness of Jesus to the world. Because that's what the church is meant to do, to represent, embody Jesus in this world. And when we do this incorrectly, we mess up that public witness. And so I'm going to give you my call to action right now as well in the message today, is as we go through these 3 challenges, I want you to decide which one do I need the most growth in my own life, and what is one step I can take this week in that area. So that's your call to action. All right, here are the 3 challenges. Number 1, don't keep sin around. Don't keep it around. Paul is writing from a standard that he knows what God's standards are. And so do you know what God's standards are? Because once we know God's standards, if we don't hit them, like the Corinthians text is saying, we ought not boast about our sin or be proud or celebrate it. We have to come together and say, no, sin sucks. It sucks that I still sin. Sin is a small word that packs a mighty punch, but at its definition, its core, it is an archery term that means to miss the mark. And so if bullseye is the mark, then that means anything outside of bullseye is sin. Those times that are just a little bit off, maybe you hit the 20 but not the bullseye, and the time when you hit the drywall, which you know you shouldn't have done. It's like, oh man, that was a bad shot. Sometimes we sin, we miss the mark a little bit accidentally. Sometimes we miss the mark a lot, and we intend to. And Paul says you can't keep that sin around. All of us have sin issues. Romans 3:10 says it this way, there is no one righteous, not even one. A few verses later in chapter 3, Romans 3:23 says, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. In our passage today in 1 Corinthians, Paul says it this way about their particular instance, your boasting, it's not good. Don't you know that a little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough? Paul says the reason I'm speaking so harshly about this particular thing, sin is a big issue that needs to be corrected because there's always consequences to sin. And if you keep it around, sin destroys. Sin destroys you, it destroys other people, it destroys relationships, it destroys marriages, it destroys businesses, it destroys churches, and it destroys the collective witness of Jesus to the world. And so no, we can't keep sin around. In fact, he'd get even more dialed in the next verse, verse 7. Say these first two words with me. Get rid. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of the old yeast. So why? So that you can be a new unleavened batch. That's who you really are. So Paul is referencing this Jewish Passover feast here, where they would actually, before they would bake the new unleavened bread, they would first sweep their entire house of all the leavened crumbs because they don't want the new bread to be contaminated with it at all. And I really like that image. So what Paul is saying, he's saying, I don't want you to keep sin around. So don't just nicely sweep it under the rug with a little bit here and make it look clean even though it's not. No, I'm telling you, sweep that stuff out of the house. We got to get that out of here. Because if we keep a little bit in, it's going to ruin the whole thing, and we can't have that because the witness of Jesus is at stake here. So we got to take care of it. When sin creeps in, we got to take care of it. Otherwise, it contaminates. And by the way, sin will creep in. Your life, my life, this church. The deeper you get in, the more sinful you see we are at this church. Well, you're welcome here, by the way. But it is not a perfect church. We are sinful in this place. But we want to do our best to not just sweep it under the rug and say we're content with it, but rather we want to get that crap out of the house. Clean it up, get it out. Because that's not who we are. That's not who we are. And so if I put my own cards on the table, I want you to know, like, a dude that's turning 40 later this year, by the way. I thought when I was mature in age and mature in my faith, I've been doing this, following Jesus since I was a baby. I've been 2 decades now into either studying or actually having been a pastor. And I'm like, man, I thought by now I wouldn't be dealing with the sinful, childish issues that I thought would be done with by now. And I hate the fact that these things get in my way. So what I don't want you to do as my Christian brothers and sisters, as my teammates, because we link arms when you're a member of this church, when you're an attender here, like we link arms to do this together. And so we work on the same team. And so what I don't want you to do is ever think that I'm content with this being the best version of Pastor Zach that you ever see. Because I'm not content with it. I want to be the greatest disciple that I can be because Jesus has been that good in my story, and I don't like these misses that get in my way, the little and the big misses. I hate that I still deal with pride at times. I don't like when greed gets the best of me. I try to avoid lust at all times, and it's really hard in this world, and I hate when I give in. I don't like the fact that every future version of myself that I think is ideal has me sitting very comfortably in the future. I think that means deep down I struggle with the idol of comfort in this world. I know that I struggle right now with the idol of recognition. I want people to notice me. Notice me, notice me, notice me. When will I ever get over this childish stuff? So I don't want this to be the best that you have of me. Just like I don't want you as you are right now. I think God has more for you. And if we don't come together and challenge one another to get better, then what are we doing here? God's been so good to every one of us that, like, not because we have to, but we want to get better. And we're tired of our brokenness and the crap that we still deal with because we thought we wouldn't be dealing with it anymore, and yet we are. And so let's call each other out and challenge, right? Let's encourage one another when we see good things. I mean, we don't got to be mean and rude about it. Like, nobody's got to stand up right now and say, Zach, you shouldn't do this anymore. That'd just be mean. But we should come together and say, hasn't God been so good to us? Can we have a conversation now about what it looks like to really follow? And so how do you do this? It's really hard to hold one another accountable. I get it. It's especially hard when you're not working from the same standards. And so number one, we got to come together and get this. We got to understand what this is, what God's standards is in our life. But you know what we also need? We need to be in a relationship with one another. So that when you come and tell me and encourage me or challenge me, and I need both of them, and you need both of them, that I know it's coming from a place of love and care and sincerity, and you wanting the best out of me. I need to know that that's your intent. I need to know that you're not here to shame me, and I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to restore you. I want something better for you because God wants that for you because that's who you are. So let's start acting like who we are and not the old Adam, which is gone now through Christ. So we need not only to know the word, but we need to be in relationship with one another. Even in this series, like, these are awesome questions we're tackling. And you get 35-minute monologues, right? I just get to tell you my opinions every week. And I love that you listen to it. It's great. But like these should be dialogues during the week too. We got to be talking about these things in small groups. We call them connect groups here where we can dive deeper. So yeah, let's come together. Let's learn and understand, make sure we're all kind of understanding the same thing, but then let's talk about these things together. We want this to be a place, one of our core values is authenticity. We want this to be a place where it's okay to not be okay to come into the King of Kings. It's okay that you're dealing with things. It's okay that you're struggling with things, but it is not okay to let sin be the last word in your story. Because God doesn't write stories that end in sin. He never has, he never will. He took sin out, by the way. He took the penalty of sin out so that you and I wouldn't be walking under those constraints anymore and those penalties and punishments anymore. And so I need to be in a relationship with you. You need to be in a relationship with me for this to work out. But we also got to know God's standards. And here's why. Like the gospel of Jesus tells us that we can change. Sin doesn't have to be the last word, right? That when Jesus rose from the dead, the Word of God now says that that same Spirit lives in you and I. And so we have the power to change. And so let's call one another when we need to change.
Hey, we're going to get you right back to the video, but first, subscribe to this channel. We've got loads of content that's going to help challenge you to be a greater disciple, whether it's other sermons or podcasts, and even some video challenges for you to complete. All of it's happening here on this channel. So let's get right back to it.
So number 2 is don't hold non-Jesus followers to a standard they never signed up for. Let me read the words of Jesus to you in Matthew 28, verses 19 and 20. Let's read these. Therefore, go and impose my teaching, values, and worldviews on all nations, threatening them with judgment and destruction if they don't obey everything I've commanded you. Wait, hang on. I think the AV team got the wrong translation there. That doesn't sound like the Great Commission from Jesus, does it? That's actually Andy Stanley's paraphrase of what he thinks too often the church is known for today. Are we known for that, church? Or are we known for what Jesus really said? Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. That sounds a lot different than imposing, forcing, and coercing our beliefs on other people. So here's what we don't have a right to do, church. We don't have a right to force our beliefs, standards, and rules on those who never signed up for our faith. Right? Let's stop looking to others that never signed up for it and act like they ought to live like we want them to. And by the way, you'll never judge somebody into the faith. So again, pointing back to the initial illustration, I bought a dog. Now I live the dog life. That's the standard now that I have to live. So every now and then, I got to carry around a bag of dangling poop. If you don't have a dog and you carry around a bag of dangling poop, like you are really bizarre and weird and probably should be institutionalized. Does that make sense? So I want that ridiculous image in your mind. That's what Christians do to non-Christians. They didn't sign up for what you signed up for. Stop holding them accountable to something they never said yes to. It doesn't make sense. To join the New York Yankees, even still today, George Steinbrenner was a military man, and so he liked the rules of like you can't have long hair and you can't have a beard if you're going to be a Yankee. He's passed away, but they've kept this rule in. And so when Johnny Damon came over from the Red Sox, he had to cut his long hair and shave his beard. But you know what? He signed a contract. He knew the rules. He did it anyway. Non-Christians haven't signed up for the rules that we've got in our lives. Here's another example in the Christian space. I'm sure you've noticed in the last decade, as a way to be more inclusive of all people and religions and worldviews, around Christmas time, less people and organizations will say the words Merry Christmas, and they'll move instead to Happy Holidays. Right? You've seen this? And this has been creating quite a stir for a while, and it's really been brewing for a long time, but it all came to steam in 2015 with what I call the Starbucks Red Cup controversy. How many of you remember this? For years, Starbucks had Christmas images on their cups, and then in 2015, they removed anything Christmassy, and it was just a red cup. And I don't drink coffee, so when I first looked, I was like, oh, that's a nice, clean-looking red cup. But I didn't realize that the Christians in our nation were super offended by this move from Starbucks. Some went so far to boycott the establishment. Some even said, this is what it feels like modern-day persecution in our nation. And I thought, you're ridiculous. God didn't ask Starbucks to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth. He asked you to do that. It's their job to serve a quality coffee. and you maybe disagree on whether it's quality or not, but their revenues prove that they're right and you're wrong, by the way. They're doing just fine, let me just say it that way. Oftentimes when we see stuff like this, it's like, what's wrong with them? When the them that we're looking at, like, they're not even Christ followers in the first place. We want them to be. We know that we have the right standards and rules and boundaries, but we can't force it on them. It's our desire that they too would see that, but we can't coerce them into it. So cool, Zach, you've told me 2 things not to do. Give me 1 thing to do. All right, here's what we're going to do. Number 3 challenge today is this: to show others, those on the outside, to show them a more excellent way. That's it. We're going to show them a more excellent way. See, the main objection those outside the faith have with our question today, what gives you the right to tell me how to live? I think you can mess with people in a lot of areas, but the one thing you don't touch is their personal freedom. Don't come at my freedom. We live in a nation that idolizes freedom. Hashtag your truth. Hashtag do you. Hashtag you do you, boo. Right? Is that a hashtag? It felt like it should be. I'm sure it is. Start it if it's not. Actually, don't start it because that's the opposite. But anyway, mess with a lot of things. Don't mess with my freedom. And so you telling me how to live, that feels limiting. That feels restraining. In the way of this world, the message of this world, the message of our nation, our culture, it's strong. Advertisers spend trillions of dollars every single year trying to sell us on something. They sell us on what? Material possessions that'll change us, on restful holiday beach vacations, on having one drink that will transform our life, on eating nacho fries and never being the same again. Right? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But there's all sorts of these messages, and here's the reality. We buy into them. We buy into them, and you're going to see, by the way, the peak of advertising and marketing happening tonight at the Super Bowl. How many are like, I don't care about the game, I want to watch the commercials? Yeah, and they want you to. They want to suck you in, by the way. Let me just tell you that. There's a great story of a marketing exec that walked into the corporate office at 5 Hour Energy. Big space. And he noticed right when he walked in, the walls are barren. There's nothing in the first impression. They give nothing, except on one wall, there was one picture that had 2 things in it. And one of the pictures was a USA Today article that rated the worst Super Bowl commercial in history, and 5 Hour Energy won that award. The worst ever. Right next to it was a plaque that says the quarter that came out was their number 1 sales and revenue quarter of all time by a mile. Which tells us what? Marketing works. Even bad marketing works. And people think that freedom without any constraints brings happiness. And yet I've met a lot of people that have eaten the nacho fries, drunk the 5 Hour Energies, settled on vacations and beaches and sandals, and had everything that this world could offer. And they found that at the end of that, they're bored. They're empty. They're anxious. They're depressed. They don't know what their next high is because they can't get any higher. Maybe the world's freedom isn't all it's cracked up to be. Another objection to this, what gives you the right to tell me how to live, is not only the restraining of freedom, but also Christianity is not free. It's a set of rules and regulations that I have to adhere to. And so we get this is illustrated in the book, The Reason for God. Keller quotes a 20th century social activist, Emma Goldman, and she says this about Christianity. Christianity is the leveler of the human race, the breaker of man's will to dare and to do. An iron net, a straight jacket, which doesn't let him expand or grow. It's this list of rules brought on by the fundamentalist movement where people have inserted and subjected rather than a real relationship with a God. It's a set of rules to adhere to, that you need to look this way and live this way, and you can't dance, smoke, drink, or associate with those who do. And we've twisted it. And so not only, don't limit my freedom, but why in the world would I want that? Brendan Manning, the author of Ragamuffin Gospel, says, the greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips walk out the door and deny him by their lifestyle, that is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. So not only it gives you the right to tell me how to live, why would I want that in my life? Following Jesus, it's restricting, it's not fun, it's boring, you're a prude. That's what they think. When I'm looking all along and I'm like, yeah, I know God offers a way of life that when I look in here, it's got some rules, it's got some lists, it's got some boundaries and some standards. Some I understand, some I don't. It's got all of that. But these aren't meant to restrict us. They're meant to help us flourish. These aren't meant to keep us down. They're meant to bring fulfillment inside of us. What are they not seeing? Maybe they're missing it. Maybe we're missing it because the Jesus I look at, everywhere he goes, he's not boring. He is the life of parties. So much so that that's one of the things I hurled against him. He's a friend of sinners. He befriends the down and out. This guy shows up at parties and starts healing people. This guy shows up and he turns water into wine. This guy is not boring. He's not prude. He's fun. He's amazing. He's unbelievable. And then when we fast forward and look at the image of heaven and what is to come, it's not described as this really sorrowful, rule-following place where you go. It's described as a heavenly banquet with praise and dancing and food and drink. Like, what about any of this is boring? I think we've missed the mark. And so I could give you a 5, 7, or 11-step point message on here's how you show others the way to Jesus, but I think we just got to get back to what Jesus did. Have fun in this world. Throw parties. Maybe I could just show you a couple pictures from when we threw a party 2 nights ago here at church, because that actually felt like heaven to me. And it did for our 220 honored guests, those with disabilities and special needs, and man, the 500 that volunteered. We've heard story after story of that was such a great night for me. I hope you were here. If you weren't, you missed out. There'll be other opportunities. We don't have to draw and coerce. We don't have to coerce and force and judge people, impose our beliefs. We just have to show them a more excellent way. And this was it. I got the privilege of leading the limousine team. Me and my family had that privilege. And here's the reality. I had to follow some rules. Like, I had to sign up on a form, I had to enter my information just as King of Kings wanted me to. I had to show up at a certain time and leave at a certain time. And when I got here, I had this list of rules that I had to adhere to and follow to make sure that everybody that night, especially the special needs kids, they got limo rides. Even on top of that, I had to manage Pastor Leroy Gerner. So I had a lot of restrictions and boundaries. And that didn't limit my fun, by the way. It was so fun. I remember walking out with one kid and I said, hey, have you been in a limo ride before? He said, yeah. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. I said, how much do you go in limos? He said, every day. Said, okay, whatever. Another kid, I was like, what's the best part of tonight? And with a big old smile, cupcakes. I said, really? How many did you have? 3? I said, you do you, you know? And the holy trinity of cupcakes, red velvet, chocolate, and vanilla on the same night. The simple joy and the smile that was on his face. But the one I remember most was Curtis. Curtis was so excited for a limo ride. He showed up twice before the limos were even there to give rides. I was like, Curtis, you gotta wait a few minutes. And so Curtis came on. I was like, dude, you're in the front one. You're in the party bus. We got 4 of them here tonight. Party bus, 3 limos. You're in the party bus. You're gonna have a great time. You ever been in a limo? No, I haven't. You're going to have a great time. So Curtis walked in there with a buddy like a boss, and he had that ride. And you know what? Curtis said, I love that one. I want the white limo, the one with the door that rises up like a falcon. I want to ride in that one. And I broke 2 rules that night. One of them was for Curtis. Everybody else had to get to the back of the line, and there was a line. But for Curtis, I said, Curtis, you're my man. You get right in that white limo right now. And so Curtis went with his buddy on a second limo, and after he got back, he said, I want the 3rd limo. And I said, Curtis, you get to that 3rd limo. And he went to the 3rd limo. He had a good ride down to Q Street and back again, and he said, I want the 4th limo. I want all 4 tonight. And I said, only for you, Curtis. And so Curtis, he got 4 limo trips to Q Street. That sounds like a documentary sometime. 4 limo rides to Q Street. I'm a film that. I don't know. But here's the reality. I broke the rules. Everybody else had to wait to the back of the line. But why did I break the rules? Because I had enough rules around me that I understood the purpose of the night was not to be infringed upon by these rules, but to bring delight and joy to everybody that was there. And I could just tell that out of all the people that did the limo rides, a lot of them had a lot of fun, but nobody had more fun than Curtis on the limo ride. And so Curtis, you get in that limo like the boss that you are. You are doing as many limo rides as you want. You go ride with Poncho, you go ride with Tom, you take the party bus with Jennifer, you do it all, because it's your night, baby. Because it's fun to follow the way of Jesus. It's so fun. And so when we get this right, by the way, I said I broke 2 rules. I'm not going to tell you the second one, because I don't need you judging me. You weren't there. You don't know what it was like. It was actually really hard and challenging to corral Leroy and everybody else. Kidding about Leroy. Can you stand? Church, when we get this right, when we're truly showing a more excellent way, we don't have to force, we don't have to impose, we don't have to judge people into this. We just get to show them that I got, that joy down in my heart, but that joy's on my mouth as I'm smiling, having a good time, throwing parties in heaven, because that's down here, because in heaven, that's what it's going to be like. And I got, by the way, when I walk with Christ, I got the constraints of my consequences of my sin eternally paid for. So I walk with confidence, knowing my eternity's taken care of. Not only that, but I walk with joy, knowing that I got purpose and meaning and fulfillment. And so no, these rules don't keep me down. They help flourish me in this world. They bring fulfillment in life. And when other people see the more excellent way, you know what they're going to say? I want some of that. What you got, I want some of that. It's not limiting and constraining, it's freedom. One last thing. Tonight when you watch the Super Bowl, there's going to be 2 commercials that stand out above any of the others. Never before has a religious commercial been able to be in the Super Bowl, but tonight the He Gets Us campaign was unanimously voted in by the owners of all 32 teams to say tonight that commercial's getting in. And you want to know the 2 messages of the commercials tonight for He Gets Us? Is that Jesus is the way. So quit following left, quit following right, quit following culture, quit following the American dream. There's a 3rd way. His name is Jesus Christ. And that's where freedom comes. So we're going to show them a more excellent way. And so that's my challenge. Those 3 things. Which one do you need? Don't keep sin around. Don't hold non-Jesus followers to a standard they never signed up for. And show others the most excellent way. Amen.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that video. Click the link below to join our Red Letter community, where we're going to send you emails and lots of content that's going to help challenge you and grow you in your faith as a disciple of Jesus.